This is Omar Ahmed for IFL TV, proudly sponsored by Everlast. Thank you to Jamie Moore for giving me some time on a Sunday afternoon. Not ideal, but obviously on everyone's minds and lips this morning, this afternoon, this evening, for a few weeks, will be Anthony Joshua's second pro loss last night against Alexander Usyk. What did you make of the fight in general, Jamie?
Well, I think a lot of people I spoke to fight week was sort of edging towards Usyk. Anyone who sort of knows boxing was saying when the fight was made, you know, everyone wanted to see AJ and Fiore, and was sort of going, this is a potential banana skin. You know, you wouldn't usually take this much of a risk in the fight before such a big fight on the line, and so it came to pass. I actually thought AJ would. I thought it would close early on, and then I thought as the fight goes on, his size it would sort of play a part in it, and fatigue would kick in. He sort of worked the other way. I think the feints and movement, which we all know Usyk's so good at, he incorporated them so well early on in the fight. AJ seemed a little bit hesitant, and he seemed a little bit too relaxed. Really, I thought. You know, he didn't really come out and try and establish himself. He sort of let Usyk lead the way, which is always a dangerous thing. And then by the time we got halfway on my card, he was sort of chasing the fight. And when you thought maybe he would switch it a little bit and use his size as an advantage and try and force it a little bit more, he just didn't seem able to do it. And I'm being brutally honest with you, I'm gutted. I was really, really hoping that we'd see AJ and Fiore. I think the British boxing fans deserve to see it, and I'm pretty gutted, to be honest. I like AJ. He's a top guy, and he's been a great ambassador for our sport. And you know, it looks like there's a rematch clause which he'll enforce. But maybe similar to what I was thinking about Fury and Wilder. Sometimes when a loss, it wasn't as emphatic as Fury and Wilder, but from a psychological point of view, where does he sort of, you know, if he's going to box him within the next 6 months, how does he sort of regroup and re-establish himself and find the confidence to go and sort of implement a game plan? It's a tough one.
Are you surprised with his tactics last night? Because we know the Usyks and Lomachenkos of this world, once they get into a rhythm and work the opponent out, it's just going to be a nightmare from there on in. So are you surprised that Joshua early on didn't set about him and try and kind of put a dent in him early on?
Yeah, I was. I was a little surprised. I think your advantages are your advantages, you know, and to try and outbox Usyk was probably not a great decision in that sense. I think sometimes the surprise element of it catches the opponent out, but it didn't really work out like that last night. And like I said, he was chasing the fight. I think it's weird because I have been saying in a few different interviews over the last month or so, building up to this fight with different people, that he's really come on so much since his loss to Ruiz. Maybe that was a little bit the part of his downfall really last night. I think he overthought it. He tried to be methodical with it, but I think the opposite. I mean, look at the success Del Boy had in the fight. You know, I know he lost the fight, but he had a lot of success, and he really made Usyk uncomfortable, much more uncomfortable than AJ did last night. And you know, looking at it on paper or from the previous performances, you'd say that AJ had a better chance of being able to manhandle him and use his power and strength. So yeah, I had a bit of a conversation with someone on Twitter before about it, saying I think he overthought it.
Right, just picking us back up with Jamie Moore. I don't know what happened there, but yeah, some weird stuff. Just both got logged out the Zoom, but we're back on now. So yeah, Jamie, just I think you were saying just surprised by Anthony's tactics last night, and you don't want to let someone like Usyk get into a rhythm.
Yeah, no, you wouldn't want to do that, and you'd like to think that he would try and sort of use his natural advantages, but he seemed to let Usyk dictate the tempo and the pace early on, and then just he was sort of chasing the fight. I hate when you get lost in your thread, in your thought process, and Zoom logs you out. It really throws you off your thinking.
Well, let me ask you a question that, again, is a burning question. I think we had it with the Ruiz one, where everyone was like, what can he do different? He showed what he did. How much more of a uphill task is correcting this wrong compared to the Ruiz one?
I think the Ruiz one was much more straightforward. You could see, I was in the arena that night, and you got a sense that something wasn't right that night. Yeah. I actually called it. I said, Jason Wood, Steve Wood's son, I was sat with him watching the ring walk, and I just sort of went, it just doesn't seem right to me. And you sort of could feel the energy in the room. Last night, I thought the opposite. I thought he looked maybe too relaxed in his ring walk. He was acknowledging the fans on the way. But it's more of a technical point of view rather than a tactical. I think you would never want to try and outbox Usyk, so I don't understand that type of thinking. I've been reading a lot of stuff on social media this morning criticising Rob McCracken and stuff like that. I think Rob McCracken's been absolutely fantastic for AJ. I think maybe he has been a little bit busy with the Olympics and stuff like that. I sort of get that. And you're always going to need a big team if your main coach has got other obligations. You're going to need other people to help out. We've got a busy gym. I need people to help me out in the gym. So it doesn't necessarily mean it won't work. But I think the main thing is Rob has got to be the sole voice in the corner for me. And that's got to be acknowledged by everyone. Everyone needs to understand, it can't be an ego thing. You can't need to want to let your voice be heard just for the sake of, because I'm in the corner. Sometimes I feel like it, when looking from the outside in, and I'm not just talking about AJ, I'm talking about some big fights in big camps. There seems to be a lot of people involved who want to be involved, and they say stuff or they try and get involved just for the sake of getting involved to try and prove that they're not getting paid for nothing. Whereas in a lot of the way, I think to prove your worth, you've already proved it in the preparation for the fight. And then to sort of cement that on fight night, you need to prove that you know how to step back and allow Rob, or in this instance, to do his job. Too many people telling you lots of different types of information. In a situation like that, AJ's under a lot of pressure, and he needs a big team around him to distribute that pressure to make it work. But ultimately, they need to understand their roles, and being blunt, they need to understand they're not as important as they probably think they are. They need to know that they've got to play their own part, but they're not as important as they think they are.
So I haven't watched this back on television yet. So what was being said in the corner, and by who?
Well, there was lots of information being shouted from the corner during the rounds, and that's a big no for me. And I can only talk from personal experience in this situation, but it doesn't work well, because your fighter needs to listen to the voice he's familiar with, and tactically, when you've laid out a game plan, you want someone to follow it through stringently, especially when there's no room for error in a fight of that magnitude. You can't have lots of different people shouting lots of different instructions. It's just confusing. And to implement a proper game plan, sometimes consistency is key. You might not get there in 3 or 4 rounds, but you might end up getting there by round 6, and then you set the path for the rest of the fight. So you can't have different people shouting different bits of information, and I was watching on TV, so you don't get the whole picture. But I can only go off what I watched last night, and I'm not saying that's the reason they lost, because ultimately AJ's in there doing it, but it can't have helped. It can't have helped having all that different types of information shouted out at
you. Okay. Well, listen, Jamie, appreciate your thoughts on last night. Just before you go, I do want to get a word on your man, Jack Catterall, ahead of his undisputed challenge against Josh Taylor, December 18th, live on Sky Sports. We'll obviously do something proper during the coming months towards that fight. But just a word on him and why you're so convinced that Jack can do the job against arguably a pound-for-pound fighter in the top 10 in Josh Taylor.
Yeah, listen, Jack's undefeated. He's an unbelievable talent, and he's the type of fighter who, the better opponent he's in with, the better the bigger the challenge, the more he rises to it. And we've seen these types of scenarios unfold over the years, where usually someone like Ricky Hatton, for instance, who was coming through, was in there against Costa Zoo, and nobody thinks that you can actually step up to that level and perform, and because you haven't been there before. But that's the whole point. The whole point is, at some point, you have to step up and prove that you can perform at that level. And I'm totally confident in the fact that Jack can do that. I know how good he is. I've seen him do it with world-class fighters in the gym. And, Josh Taylor's an unbelievable fighter. I'm not saying he's not, but I know how good Jack is. And, we know how difficult the fight is going to be, because one of the best attributes of Josh Taylor is he's fiery, he's ballsy, he digs deep, he fights hard, he fights at a high tempo. And to add to that, he's got world-class attributes in terms of skill level. So we know how difficult it's going to be. But I'm so confident that Jack's going to pull it off. He's waited a long, long time. So even though we over the 3-year period, we've been looking at 3 different opponents in terms of fighting for the world title. It was Ramirez before he agreed to step aside. And then before that, it was, his name escapes me now, who Ramirez beat.
Was it Maurice Hooker?
Hooker, yeah, sorry. So I was thinking about Hooker first,
yeah,
and then obviously Ramirez. And then when Jack agreed to step aside to let the unification fight go ahead, we was always confident that Taylor was going to win. So our focus has always been on that from then. So when you have that time to sort of think about how to go about beating a fighter, it's always better. 10, 12 weeks is never ideal. Never ideal to make preparation for a fight of this magnitude. But we've had months and months. So it's all getting in. It's all programming, and Jack's well on his way. And he deserves this opportunity. Win, lose or draw, he's earned his opportunity, and the gesture of him stepping aside and allowing that fight to happen, with the promise that he would then fight for the undisputed title. I'm glad that Josh Taylor's stuck to his word. He was on a gentleman's agreement, it wasn't a contracted thing, and he stuck to it. So I take my hat off to him for that. But it's going to be a hell of a fight. Well,
listen, it'll be a historic occasion up in Scotland, December 18th. Jamie, appreciate your time on this Sunday, and I'm sure we're going to catch up soon, all right? Thank you.
Top man. Cheers, you, man.